This is Tim Willis, and with only a copy of OBS, built-in laptop microphone, this is another video from the Nomad Funnelhacker. So we're continuing our series on the basic functions of the ClickFunnels editor, and we're talking about the current version of ClickFunnels, sometimes known as ClickFunnels 2.0. We are going to be using the same page that we've been using with the rest of this series. And so we have a headline, 2-column row, 3-column row, 2-column row, and a button. And we have already covered the border, so we're going to cover something that's similar but different this time, which that's the shadow control. And so your shadow control exists on your section, on your rows, and on selected elements like your images. The shadow control does not exist on your text elements like your headline, although there is a text shadow you can apply to that, but there's no shadow that will go around the exterior the way that the shadow will go around on the rows, the images, and the sections. So with that, let's take a look at the shadow. We won't have shadow often on sections. Occasionally you may see that. More likely you'll see it on a row or an individual element like an image. So let's go ahead and go to our row here. And we're going to turn on the shadow. And we immediately see that there's a shadow around our 2-column row there. Let's take a look at the controls. So we do, of course, have 3 presets from the style guide. We're not going to be using those. We have 2 styles, outset and inset. I'll demonstrate that a little bit. We have an X and a Y direction control. I'll show that in a little bit. And we have a control for blur and a control for spread and our color. So let's go ahead and change our color to red just to make things more visible. Right now we're set at a blur of 4 pixels and a spread of 8 pixels. Let's take the blur to 0. And you see now you don't have any blur. It's a pretty distinct line. If we move the blur way out, you can see how it spreads out like that. We're going to go and make our blur 5. And then we have our spread. And again, we'll make that 0. And you see that is basically your stroke control. And then if we move it out, it just keeps on getting bigger. And we're going to push that to a 2. And those are the settings I generally like to start with the shadow. Now, of course, generally I'm not going to be using red. I'm just doing that on this video for right now to make things more demonstrable. Even that, let's go ahead and make it 5 on the spread just to make things a little more apparent. Now, one of the things you can do with your shadow is you can turn on your corner control and you can round the corners. Let's make our corners 10. And see, now we have a rounded shadow effect. It's also rounding the corners of the row itself. That's why all is rounded at the corners. And next, we can adjust our X and Y direction. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and demonstrate the inset and outset. So I am going to come to my section. And for right now, I am going to change the color, the background color, to, let's see what we got here. Let's go with this blue. Actually, maybe black instead. Yellow. Trying to pick out a good contrast color here. Not red. All right, let's go with blue because we still see the text a little bit there. All right, so we can see the outline there. And then if we go to our row controls, we go to shadow section. We'll see that it's set to outset right now. Here's what happens when we set it to inset. So basically, the shadow exists either on the outside or the inside of the row perimeter. And so if we set it to inset, it's going to spread out on the inside. If we set it to outset instead, our row spread will be spreading out from the outside perimeter of the row. Okay, so that's the difference on how that works. So let me go back, now that I've explained that. Go to our section and we're going to return it back to the white background. So let's go right now and turn off the corner control so we have, and that gives us the square edges. And then we're going to demonstrate the X and Y control. And so I'm going to place 5 in the X direction and 5 in the Y direction. So now you can see the majority of shadow has moved to the left and to the bottom of the row. And that's using positive numbers. Now this is sort of like the grid coordinates you may have dealt with in the algebra class you barely passed, but it works kind of the opposite with the positive and negative numbers here in the shadow control. So if we put a -5 in the X direction, we can see it has moved to the left, but we still have the Y direction focused on the bottom. Now if we make the Y direction negative as well, you'll see that it had moved from the bottom to the top. And then if we wanted the shadow prominent on the top but on the right, we would go ahead and make our X direction a +5 again. And so that's how the X and Y controls work. And that pretty much covers it for the shadows except for our color. Now our color is just your standard color palette. You can adjust your opacity, you can use the color palette, you can choose one of the recently used colors, or you can type in a hex code. Now one thing on this is, generally speaking, and there are no rules of course, but generally speaking, your shadow is going to be somewhat muted. So let's go ahead and make our blur 5 and our spread of 2. This is kind of where I like to start a lot of times. And then let's go to our color and adjust our opacity. And I would probably make this, let's go with 20% here. And even on this, I would probably take the spread down to 1. Might even make the blur 3. And I think we'll make it, keep it at 5. And then I would probably adjust my opacity or adjust my color to get a more muted kind of effect. Of course, I still have the X and Y controls on, so let's take them off. And so we have a shadow there that's very subtle. So that's pretty much it for the shadow control. My name is Tim Willis. I'm a certified ClickFunnels funnel builder. I make tutorial and demonstration videos on ClickFunnels, funnel building, webpage design, and all the tools that go along with doing all those things. That's the video for now. I'll talk to you later.